Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the very first podcast on this brand new platform on a Wednesday evening here in the Bay Area. This is going to be a very special effort on other than the regular YouTube channel that I run, and a little bit about myself, just because this is the first podcast and it will be broadcast on a lot of podcast apps as well, including Spotify and Apple. Um just wanted to share a little bit about myself. I am Varun Kapoor, an IT professional here in the Bay Area, in the Silicon Valley itself. Have worked for a lot of IT companies, the top 10, I would call them. And I have been very fortunate to work in the IoT space as well, which is the topic for today. So, I'm more than happy to kick off this podcast uh, with someone who is already an industry leader. Uh, I've already shared the details. Biren Gandhi, who is going to be the speaker today. He is the founder and CEO of SpeaktoIoT and Smart India. He has been doing this for a very long time. He's a Silicon Valley veteran himself and an industry leader. He's been there for more than 20 years, an angel investor, a mentor, advisor. He has been a mentor to a lot of businesses, some nonprofit entities, as well as he's also a very passionate keynote speaker. So, and of course, since he is, one of the pioneers in the IoT domain, it's really my privilege and my honor to have him here on this particular podcast where we are kicking off um, discussions around innovation, discussions around technology, discussions around mentorship and entrepreneurial, mindset building. So, without wasting any more time, I'm going to have him on the screen. Before I get him on the screen, make sure you do subscribe to the podcast and as well as the YouTube channel. And if you have any kind of follow-up questions, don't shy away. Feel free to add your questions and comments to the YouTube post, or you could always email me at podcast@kapurz.net, and we'll be more than happy to revert back. All right, with that, I'm going to have the guest speaker with me. Hello, Biren. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, hi. Thank you. Thank you, Varun. Happy to be here.
And welcome from on behalf of the Silicon Valley Tech Podcast team as well. It's an honor for us, someone who has been such an industrial kind of industry leader, someone who has led many kind of companies, as well as worked for some amazing companies in the Bay Area, or as I like to call it, the Silicon Valley itself. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So I know I did introduce you a little bit, but I would love to hear from you. Who is Biren Gandhi? And the second thing to follow up on that, what's the one thing that's on top of your mind as we start off this conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah. First of all, thanks a lot for having me on the show. And it's a privilege to be on the opening session of this podcast series, right? So it's a very special, near and dear for, I'm assuming, for you, as well as all the viewers who have
Absolutely.
joined in, tuned in, and for me as well. A little bit on my background. I'm proud to consider myself as a humble, lifelong learner on a variety of domains, because that's what this whole technology and Silicon Valley is all about. It makes us keep learning day in and day out, and new technologies come in and old ones go phase out. I was fortunate to be part of like four or five such category defining technologies over the last 20 plus years in the Bay Area. Started with the Facebook when the social networking was not invented, actually very old days, 2004, 2005 timeframe, where Facebook had less than a couple of hundred people. So fortunate to be part of that whole social media revolution from the beginning, in defining that category and working on that. Was extremely privileged to work on that. Then the next wave of was of social games. So I was part of Zynga as well. Many of you might be familiar with Farmville and many other Will series games,
Right.
social games. So I was fortunate to be part of Zynga for creating the whole social gaming category where people could play together.
Very
The
nice.
third phase was obviously during my tenure at Cisco, where we were kicking off all this IoT, the inception of the whole IoT ecosystem. The IoT word was obviously coined long back, but the real momentum did not start until like 2010-11 timeframe, when the connectivity was more ubiquitous and cheap and affordable. So was part of this whole IoT ecosystem from the early days, pre-inception days as well, and most recently, obviously, as part of my own startup, which is SpeaktoIoT, and some of you can obviously guess it. It's in the voice AI part of it. So that's another new category which is going to revolutionize how people interact with IoT. So I'm super excited to be part of all this, like the technological revolutions I've been part of, and looking forward to many more together.
Wonderful, wonderful, and yes, we are living in that day and age of technology where every few days, every few months, there is something new that pops up, and there is always a lot of technology which kind of transitions to the newer, fancier, faster, quicker way. Now, you mentioned, of course, Speak to IoT. I'm sure is close to your heart as well, as much as IoT is closer to a lot of people, which comes with a lot of challenges, I'm sure, and working in the same kind of domain right now, I've learned one of the biggest challenges that comes with anything that has to do with IoT is a lot of security and vulnerability and the risks involved.
Mhm.
But for a layman, let's start off with that. What is IoT? How would you define IoT? And then we'll continue from there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, IoT is a buzzword, obviously, and there are many, many different, like more interpretations, sometimes millions of interpretations of the word itself, if not
Right.
more. But I generally like to go with the basics. How will you explain it to a 5-year-old? Right? That's like a very simple way to understand any big buzzword. So IoT for the beginners, it's the Internet of Things. So we are familiar with the internet today, but when it started off, like go back in time about like 50 years or so, when it all started off with DARPA and other things, like how the internet came in existence, it was like connected web of some shared documents. People were just sharing some documents on some network where they could access remotely. Then it
Right.
evolved into HTML documents and the markup, like more of a fancier web pages and static websites, obviously. So it was Internet of Documents, Internet of Websites. Then it went into the Internet of Commerce, basically the dynamic websites and e-commerce. So that phase came into existence, and after that, it was more of an Internet of APIs, the web services which are talking to each other. And this Internet of Things is by same extension is the connected web of little things. Now, what is a thing? A thing could be any piece of electronic, essentially, which is connected somehow to some other entity. If it is isolated and disconnected, yes, it is still a thing, but it's not a connected thing. But if it is
Right.
connected to some other entity, then it's a thing, it's a connected thing. And when you combine all those, like a large mesh of such systems, that becomes like Internet of Things. And by volumes, by numbers, the estimates, like they have stopped long time back, but previously they were all estimating about 50 billion devices by 2017 and 100 billion by 2019 and so on and so forth. But it is today it's at least billions of devices interconnected together, That's what Internet of Things is.
Right. And just to add to what you just mentioned, I'll share some of the older statistics, which have been there.
Hmm.
They were saying, revenue for 2020 was expected to be 212 billion worldwide. They also were estimating, worldwide IoT spending to be about 1 trillion around 2021. Uh, Also, they were listing out the market size to be more than 4 trillion by 2025. Uh, and the last, maybe I can share one more, which is the amount of data that would be generated by IoT devices themselves only was said to be about 79.4 or almost 80 zettabytes by 2025. So looking at all this, the vast amount of data, the vast amount of money, the vast amount of investment that companies are rolling out,
Hmm.
what is there for a common man, for somebody like me sitting on my desk? What does this IoT, the buzzword, what does this entail? What does it mean for me?
It could mean like many different things to many different people, but ultimately the question needs to be answered in like what's in it for me, at
Yep.
individual level, at small company level, at large corporate level, for governments, for any entity, for that matter, right? So for any technological piece to come into existence and have adoption around that, typically it has to comply to like one of the three elements or all three elements. Like one is it should somehow increase revenues for companies or make people's lives better, faster, cheaper, super better, whatever you want to tag it, right? That's
Right.
one category. Second is it has to affect somehow the bottom line, the productivity, cutting costs, increasing the capabilities of remote management and those sort of things. So that is like second element. And the third element is like fundamentally shifting the user experience, like how people interact. Like in the pre-iPhone days, for example, we have all used those like text-based and the touch phones, right? But like the experience completely transformed after the iPhone made it like huge leaps and bounds. So
Right.
same way for any technology to survive, it has to match like at least one of these three categories. Otherwise, why should anybody care? It's just a hobby of somebody, and let a small group of people take care of their hobby.
Right.
So IoT, by that standard, it was affecting, but now that growth and the influence is accelerating over last decade or so. So it is, whether we like it or not, whether we are aware of it or not, it is affecting everybody's lives on the planet. Whether it's like having some the security cameras mounted in the variety of city offices and cross streets and junctions, or whether those are like security cards, access cards, everything and anything is becoming more and more connected. So I think it is important for us to at least know what it is. Now, how much we will be influenced by that, only time will tell, and depending on where we are in that stack. For some people, hey, it doesn't matter, I don't care, which is perfectly valid. Versus for somebody else, that is the bread and butter every day in and day out. That's the life. So it's a whole spectrum, and where we sit on the spectrum that decides how much one should care about IoT.
Got it. Got it. But with like you mentioned earlier, any new invention, any innovation that happens, or anything that new comes up, it brings in a lot of challenges. It brings in a lot of risks. Now, for adoption or for a general adoption across the board, what are some of those challenges that you see around IoT space?
It's very interesting question. Actually, that's there's a whole gamut of challenges, right? I mean, and that is true for any technology. Sometimes those are like non-technical in nature, sometimes they are political in nature, and sometimes they are like highly technical, security, cyber security, all those related things, right? So IoT is full of all kinds of challenges, right? Not just one kind of. So
True.
starting from security, you mentioned security earlier, right? Like it's a that is one of like a top of the mind, because those small devices, previously they were not connected. Now suddenly you start connecting them, interconnecting them, and offering remote access. There's obviously the security vulnerability attack surfaces, attack vectors, they just exponentially go up. So
Right.
naturally, the security is one of the biggest concerns of IoT. But at the
Okay.
same time, privacy is another concern for citizens, right? A lot of the cool technologies are using facial recognition and the AI tools and connected cameras for notifying alerts to the authorities and all. If, like, let's say some terrorist is wandering around freely in a metropolitan area, obviously authorities need to be aware of that individual. But the
True.
very same thing for targeting one individual, you are actually monitoring every single citizen, every single resident of that city. That is creating a lot of privacy nightmares also for the political campaigns around the world, across the globe. So, but
Correct.
keeping those things aside, I mean, if we come back and more of a, because some of those are societal problems, right? And there is no one way to fix, there is no one single solution. Sometimes you have to give a lot of time for people's mindset to evolve around those issues and settle down with, okay, it is okay for me to give up certain degree of privacy for this 10 times more benefits, right? Just like we started off with the Google and the free browser based services and everything. Like, there's nothing free, but people are okay to give up some part of that private life for getting the benefit. So same thing is going on for IoT as well. But if we bring it down to more of a technical challenges, right? Because this is a technology related podcast. So one of the basic the challenge is obviously the connectivity at the lowermost level of IoT. Like, how do you connect the unconnected? So how do you connect those little sensors, like tiny devices? Sometimes, like, they are so tiny as temperature sensors and humidity sensors and like the PIR sensors, whatever that is, like very, very tiny device. Like, how do you put intelligence inside that device to even have the connectivity? There is no Wi-Fi, no Zigbee, Z-Wave, no RFID, no kind of connectivity, right? So connectivity is like a basic layer problem, like how to make connections from that device higher up. Then the next level problem is obviously the services layer problem, the components. Like, how do you organize the whole massive data set? So for example, just as an example, let's say we have a temperature sensor which emits some temperature reading every second. It says, hey, I'm 72 degrees. Like, now you just in 1 minute you're going to have 60 readings of that sensor alone. It's a massive bandwidth and data when you combine millions and billions of sensors across the globe, like that. So there are different models of, sometimes you capture the data, then you store the data, and then you process the data in the classic cloud computing model. But then the new models, which are more of a fog computing and edge computing, they say, hey, you capture the data, then you process the data first and store only what is meaningful after that, right? So how do you componentize where the data goes? Like, the sensor is connected, but where does the connectivity go to the higher up? Is it peer-to-peer connectivity, or is it more of a hierarchical tree-like, forest-like connectivity? So that's like a second channel of fathoming all that, the massive data bandwidth and the associated cost and all. Then the third part is obviously on the top layer, the application layers. Like, how do you give secure access to the applications to consume that data, whether it's the analytics, just drawing some fancy graphs and just getting the readings, versus you are predicting on when a component is going to fail, or whether you are commanding and controlling, even not just sensing but actuating also the downward stream as well. So how much an application can do. And the fourth part is the access layer, the top. Like, how do people access all this like massive data, all the services and the applications? Back when we were thinking and starting on this whole IoT ecosystem, the paradigm, one of the early problem which was detected was of fragmentation, and which exists even today. Right? You buy any smart gadget from the store, from Amazon, from anywhere. It comes with its own mobile app. Now you need that mobile app to control that smart gadget. Now, how many different mobile apps, different user interfaces, different accounts one can have in order to capture like 10, 15 different vendor devices? So how do you access in a seamless fashion all that plethora of information in the IoT land? Whether it's a consumer in your home, you have one set of access. When you go to job, hopefully we'll be going to back to offices soon in the post-pandemic time. So when you go to the job, then you have another network settings and the infrastructure, the enterprise level settings. When you're interacting in public spaces, malls and theaters, and there the connectivity paradigms are different. You don't want to reveal. So how do you manage this whole different persona, the access of different persona in a seamless fashion? And that's one of the trigger point for that thought process actually gave birth to my startup Speak to IoT, because we believe this whole fragmentation of IoT platforms, there are 100 plus platforms, or whole fragmentation of like which dashboards, and always going to look into something and learning different UIs and UX elements. It's like all painful. It's not scalable in the IoT land. So we believe voice is that universal, no appless, dashboardless, like universal access mechanism, which is simple enough. You don't have to learn like how to do certain things. All you care about what to do, and even if you say it something in incorrect fashion, boom, it takes care of things. Just you don't have to always type the command in that specific manner. You don't have to teach people about using how to use that dashboard and user interface and how many clicks you don't have to go through all the training exercise and developing and upgrade exercise. So access is like, we believe it's like very very powerful, because no matter how powerful the underlying infrastructure is, unless it is very very simple for end users to use, it is going to be challenging for adoption. And again, taking the example of iPhone back again, right? Like having that one button, Steve Jobs fought really hard for having just one button instead of multiple buttons, which were very popular, and no buttons also, right, for the keypad. So simplicity is hard work, and we believe the voice provides that simplicity, and hence like we created the startup around bringing voice to the IoT land and named it as Speak to IoT. You can control everything using voice.
Perfect, perfect. And that takes me to the most important point of this whole podcast, voice of IoT. You have a company called SpeaktoIoT, and it needs to have the voice. So what is this voice of IoT? Talk us through a little bit about that, and if possible, give us some examples, or maybe potentially some kind of a demo as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So as I was saying earlier, it's accessing IoT is typically done today. The most common ways is mobile apps and bunch of dashboards, right? Whenever we say, hey, you have some dashboard, nice graphs, pie charts, and like all the, the waterfall models and everything, it that is considered as the visual part of the IoT. We went one step beyond that. It's like, okay, how many different elements you can even talk or train users on? So we said, hey, let's give voice to all these IoT devices. So you should be able to interact with those devices using your natural human voice in different languages, whether you are speaking English or Spanish or Hindi, it doesn't matter. It's all, even if you are saying incorrect grammar, doesn't matter. As long as you're providing the information to the system, which is sufficient, that's all it matters. Then system should have the intelligence to process that information, take in, and give you the intelligent response as a result. So building this voice first interfaces for not just for the smart home uh, devices and those all intelligent devices, but building this voice first interfaces for corporates, for enterprises, for our network gadgets, for different kind of needs, for any kind of backend system, whether it's an ERP system or CRM systems. Voice becomes that like first contact point for accessing anything. And speaking of the demo, let me show you. I hope it works. Actually, it's a real live implementation of
Sure.
one of the Google Assistant skill that we have
Okay.
developed. So let
Sure.
me open the public application, Google Assistant. I hope I'm
Yes.
all right. Talk to voice of things.
Hello from Voice of Things powered by SpeaktoIoT. How can I assist you?
How many people are there in the waiting area?
A few seconds ago, waiting area was occupied by 15 users out of its allowed capacity of 20. How else can I assist you?
Where can I find the medical kit?
A few seconds ago, medical kit was located around History Zone at MLK Library. Can I help you with something else?
What's the temperature in the medical room?
A few seconds ago, temperature in medical room was reported at 75°F. How else can I assist you?
What's the humidity in the waiting area?
A few seconds ago, humidity in waiting area was reported at 35%, which is healthy for indoor environment. Can I help you with something else?
How many people are there in the medical room?
A few seconds ago, medical room was active with 7 users out of its allowed capacity of 8. Can I help you with something else?
Can you locate a wheelchair, please?
A few seconds ago, wheelchair was located around zone 2 at medical school. Can I help you with something else?
Goodbye.
Very
So
impressive. Very
yeah,
nice. Wow.
so as you might have seen, like there is no dashboard, no other mobile app. This was like running purely Google Assistant, freely downloadable app on iPhones, and it's built in for all the Android phones worldwide, right? So, and it was interacting with bunch of sensors: temperature sensor, humidity sensor, the people presence sensor, which is again we are interfacing with different backend systems for that. Sometimes with Cisco, sometimes with Juniper Mist, sometimes with Meraki, different subsystems underneath, and giving a more of a holistic view to the end user. And end user should not have to think that, hey, where do I go for that piece of information, or which dashboard, which website should I go to for that piece of information? For end user, it should be all in one place, unified. Doesn't matter whether which language you speak in, which order you speak in. It's a natural language powered interface. So that is what I meant by voice of IoT. I thought like actually showing is more than telling. So that's why like this was actually running live system, and you can also try on your voice assistant as well. Anybody can try talk to voice of things. You have to enable that skill once and link your account, and but after that it's freely accessible, so you can have a taste of your own as well using this technology.
Very, very, very impressive and very nice. I'm going to pick a question. While you were talking about the IoT and the entire thing, Ishita is asking, would we be able to create any kind of an IoT language, or let me put it even more simpler or generic. Do we even need a IoT language?
uh, well in my opinion, no, because most of the one of the beauty of IoT is M to M, the mobile to mobile or machine to machine interfaces. When humans are using language, typically it goes through like multiple contextualizations and interpretations, versus when machines are talking, they just talk in binary at the end. I mean, for them that is like doesn't matter what it is. So the language of IoT is binary, ones and zeros, bottom line, right? And on top layer for man to machine, human to machine interfaces, that's where these natural language tools are providing very, very powerful interfaces for interacting with machines. So human to machine is natural language, whatever humans are capable of,
Right.
whatever language you are feeling comfortable, and between machine to machine, it's just the binary. So I don't think there is a new language invention necessary. Instead, like we have sufficient thing. It's just to drive more adoption around that.
Got it. Got it. And I see a few more comments coming in, so I'll pick them up as well one by one. But like Daksh Preeti is asking, how does it fill information into a CRM system? Does it do that?
Uh, so yeah, I mean it can. You have to have at the end of the day. There is no magic, right? We are living in the world which is powered and constrained by laws of physics. So there is no magic here. So somewhere somebody has to do the work, but the human beings are always striving to minimize their workload, right? We are lazy beings at the bottom. We always try to minimize our efforts. So yes, once the APIs, the adapters are building in for reading and writing to the CRM systems or ERP systems underneath, we can access them using voice or using any other medium. And voice is the most proliferating medium right now. In the future, that would be like brain caps and few other things. Just by thoughts, you can do certain things, but we are a little bit away from that manner. But voice is like here and now as a practically feasible way of doing things. As long as you have the backend interfaces and APIs to the right systems, anything is possible.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. So let me ask another question. Like we already discussed, there are challenges, there are issues, vulnerabilities, and whatnot. Uh, every single organization which is trying to adapt to the IoT space, or trying to get more devices connected and get them to talk to each other. If I own a company like that, or maybe let me just put it this way, I am just starting a company and I really want to spend my dollars wisely, and I really want to think about it. So what are those things that I need to keep on my in my list or on my top of my mind before I invest into anything related to IoT? What would be those key things?
Uh, I think one of the basic thing is always the value creation, right? So there are always like two sides of certain things, the price and the value. So
Right.
whenever we think that the price we are paying for an entity is less than the value we are getting in return, we'll be happily paying that price. People pay for Netflix, people pay for Spotify, people pay for subscriptions of various kinds because they are thinking the price they are paying versus the value they're getting in return is way higher. And same principle applies here in the IoT land. It's no different. Whenever somebody is creating something of value, something which solves one of those three things I highlighted earlier, whether it's affecting the top line, whether it's affecting the bottom line, whether it's driving and changing the user experience fundamentally. So if there is enough value which is created by that entity, by that company, versus how much you are investing into, what is the price you are paying to create that value. So as long as the value is higher than the price, it's going to be a feasible venture.
Got it. Got it. And another thing which always comes to my mind right now, being in the technology domain myself, a lot of noise, and this is all good noise, is being made around artificial intelligence, machine learning, and whatnot. Uh, how does that correlate with the IoT space? And how do you see from a future perspective, where does that lead us in this IoT space?
Wow, that's that's a big one actually. But so I mean, the way I like to talk about is the three-way transition. Usually, the artificial intelligence and the humans. That's a big singularity debate which is going on, whether humans will be underpowered by the machines and artificial intelligence systems of tomorrow and next decade and all. So the way I like to highlight is like previously we were focusing on all the hand powered blue collar jobs, and then the industrial revolution came in and it took away majority of the hand powered human jobs away because of the automation and industrial revolution of some kind. So then human beings kind of switched to the head powered job, the intellectual kind of jobs, the white collar revolution. Now in today's age, with increased influence of AI, even those things are slipping away. There are AIs which are writing code on their own. There are AI systems which are much more faster and powerful than humans making decisions. And we are seeing Teslas all around here, at least in the Bay Area, right? Like all the self-driving and auto-driving mechanisms, right? So they are making much faster decisions, even intellectual decisions, right? Which requires like tremendous capability to process data. So even the head related jobs are going away, they're slipping away from human beings control. So the third revolution comes in is like a heart, so hand, head and heart finally. So emotions are still in very much in human beings control. Yes, there are AI systems which are creating music albums, there are AI systems which are creating the paintings and artworks and all that, but it's in the very rudimentary stage. So the emotions area, the memories, the stories, that area is still very much in human beings control. So I think there is going to be a natural transition and uh, concentration around skills in that area moving forward, as we are seeing more and more AI powered things. I mean, AI is generating marketing scripts and AI is generating all the novels and writing, and this the GPT-3 algorithms are like super powerful in kind of generating new material, new content, right? So So all those things are going to happen. But as far as the IoT is concerned, so there is going to be a merger of IoT, AI, and voice to a certain degree moving forward. The boundaries are not yet known, but it goes back to reducing the human effort. Human beings are increasingly becoming lazier, right? As I mean, and that's how we are wired up psychologically. So always we try to minimize our effort. If things can be done without getting up from the chair, we'll do
Yeah,
that. If,
right.
right? So that basically requires increased convenience, and that means like some kind of system which is helping us human beings in achieving that convenience. Then the AI comes in, which is kind of predicting what we need or what we might need, right? We have seen the Gmail interface, like which is predicting the text as you are typing, right? It is kind of trying to say like, hey, you just have to enter tab or space bar, and boom, it just completes the sentence, right? So
Correct.
you are becoming more of predicting things. And the same thing, the IoT is the control part of it, the actuation. Like, how do you make something happen in the physical world, right?
Right.
AI will tell that, hey, this should be done. You can give like voice commands or some other forms of commands that, hey, do it. But who is actually going to manifest it in the physical world? And that's where the IoT's challenge is going to be unraveled in a way. So, variety of sensors feeding the data into the AI systems, and the actuators and the controls, including the robots and the tiny nanobots and drones and all those sort of things, which are offering the actuation mechanism. So AI, voice, and IoT, they are pretty much going to be the part of life 50 years from now, if not 10 or 20 years down the road.
Right. I'm gonna, one of the things that you just mentioned, the laziness. I read somewhere most of the inventions that have happened in the past and that will also happen in the future is because of that laziness of people who want to kind of automate something and make their own life easy. So I can definitely relate to that quote that the statement that you made. There are two more questions which I'm going to take, and I also want to be mindful of the time. So one of the things is based on what you were telling, Preeti was asking, how do you calculate value? Whether we are getting value out of it or not. How do you do that?
Uh, that's like it's more of an art than science. There is some science, and I think some of the numbers you also quoted earlier, like number of devices and this trillions of dollars, right? I mean, there is no scientific way of guaranteeing that value, right? It's all based on perceived value. So value is very intangible in that manner. But when somebody, you can always say that, hey, if I'm willing to pay a price, it means the value is something more than the price I'm willing to pay. Otherwise I will not be paying that price. So I'm paying, let's say, $10 for a service. It means the
Yeah.
value has to be $11 at least, roughly. Right? Now whether it's $11 or whether it's $20 or whether it's $100, that is like open to interpretation. But
Correct.
whenever somebody, so the value numbers are always derived from the corresponding price numbers, how much people are willing to pay or spend on a given piece of product or service, and that's how you will derive the value numbers. But there is no hard science, unfortunately, in that domain.
Right. And I think that's the art that we all are learning, not only in the IoT space, but other places as well. That sometimes it's not like hardcore tangible outcome that you get, but some of those side effects that you see. I've been part of a lot of programs myself, and specifically in IoT space and outside of IoT space. Sometimes taking out the value out of it becomes very difficult, but sometimes the customer feedback, sometimes those statements from the or the customers, the words that they use, how easy it has made their life or the team's life. I think those are also good factors, and that's where we need to invest. For example, covid has transformed everyone's life. Nobody would have imagined the kind of lifestyle we are in right now, the lifestyle we are leading right now. uh,
Hmm.
be it the schools, the kids, how they have adapted, how we as adults, who for us a lot of development, a lot of innovation used to happen while sitting in office, but the same thing is now happening while we all are working from home. So all these changes that is happening around us is also part of that evolution which is happening, and including the IoT space. One more question which I'm flashing is, how secure is Speak to IoT? Any security concerns you know or see?
Well, there are always going to be security concerns, right? No, we can never rule out that something is 100% secure. Otherwise, we won't be seeing those many hacking attempts. But naturally, we can take care of what we know. And obviously, based on my past experience with Facebook, with Zynga, with Cisco, with a few other companies in the enterprise and consumer space, security is of paramount importance. So we have taken like special measures to even secure the lowest levels of devices. For example, our India-centric brand called Smart India, where we are selling those consumer smart home devices, right? Switches and smart plugs and all. So we have taken special precautions to secure those tiny devices and how they connect to our cloud to the back. Because by default, the open source protocols, I mean, they are the tools. They will give you all the tools of the trade, but it's up to you how to wire and use and leverage those tools for overall security and privacy concerns of your audience. So yes, we have taken care of everything we could imagine, obviously, because that's what the customer trust is. And in fact, in some other enterprise use cases, we have done some demos where part of our application actually resides behind the firewall within the enterprise controlled area, and it is connecting securely with our cloud, so that there is no directly, the devices are not connecting to the cloud at all. They are always connecting to something local for the enterprise environment, and that enterprise component in turn is connected to the cloud through a fighter pipe. But yes, we have taken some precautions, but let's hope we don't get hacked. But if we are, we have to just deal with it, just like everybody else is dealing with that.
Right, right. So, just as we try to kind of wrap up this particular session in the last 10 minutes, uh, one of the things that, you are the CEO of Speak to IoT, you're also leading the effort of Smart India. Uh, you know, Tell us from your perspective, when you're meeting customers or clients or potential, investors, what are the top three or, top two, three things that are on top of their mind when it comes to IoT? What are the things that they are scared of? What are the things that they are excited about? And why would somebody, if say for example, I'm gonna say, as a investor, if I have to invest something, if I have to think about that, this is going to be the thing in the IoT space, what could be that maybe you could share a little bit about that as well.
Sure, some thoughts. I'm based in Silicon Valley, but my co-founder Karan Sheth, he's based in Mumbai. So we have a visibility on both sides of the planet, right? The different ecosystem and mindset based in customers and companies in India, and
Right,
ecosystems and mindsets of the Western mindset, right?
right,
Most of the time, one of the most common, especially in the South Asian markets, the top of the line comment is cost. The top of the it's like, okay, cost. And the reason is people are still not sure, like leveraging the IoT. For example, let me give a voice example. Like you have a regular refrigerator versus you have a voice enabled refrigerator, for that matter, which
right,
can be controlled by, or which can be interacted by Google and Alexa and Samsung and whatnot. Now, the
right,
manufacturer, let's say manufacturer is selling the standard refrigerator for $1,000 for the sake of simplicity. Now,
right,
if the cost of implementation is, let's say, $100 with Speak to IoT's voice powered solution, they are not sure whether this new cost of $100 will they be able to recoup from the market as a premium product. If they are not, if they are willing to sell it for $1,500 or $2,000, this smart refrigerator, then only they'll be making the investment of $100 in kind of building these new capabilities. But that's what they are not sure of yet. And that's like it's a adoption curve. Typically it rises slowly and then exponentially it kicks off when everything goes off. So cost is one of the main concern there. On the US and the Western world side, the privacy and the security are the topmost concerns, right? Because sometimes, especially in the voice land, if you have to speak the commands loud, There is no voice printing capabilities which are possible. So I can say something, and my son also can say something and say, "Hey, buy this thing," and boom, the commerce happens. Right? How do you prevent those things with two-factor authentication in the voice land, in the IoT land? So
Right.
the bigger concern in the Western mindset is about like privacy and security around that. Like, how do you give access only to the authorized person in a seamless fashion? And in the Eastern hemisphere, we have typically the cost concern as the top of the mind concern.
Got it. Got it. And you mentioned about these. I would love to call them like funny problems to have. I've heard stories, we've read stories in different medium, where the kids and all that stuff, they with the power of words, like even before this particular session when we were chatting, my IoT devices, my Alexa or my device would also start talking. One of the things that we all are always scared and skeptical. One is the security aspect. The second is we always have the fear that it's constantly observing, hearing us, and maybe we don't know how it would react or behave in our absence. End of the day, it's all technology. Not everyone is technologically savvy, so they're always scared. So you mentioned about this refrigerator which has that smart capabilities. People are always scared, skeptical. Do I really need to spend this much money to get this kind of a fridge or this kind of a device? So if in a very layman language, again, not Biren Gandhi, the technocrat, not the technical person, but as a layman, if you have to tell another layman why to kind of spend your dollars or to spend your time on such technology or such devices, what would be that advice to them?
It goes back to that fundamental element of like, what is the problem it is solving, right? Like, so I'm keeping myself aside for just 1 minute or so.
Mhm.
I'm putting myself into my parents' shoes, right? Like 70 plus. You are
That's right.
sleeping as an elderly person. You are sleeping in the middle of the night. Like you need to go to restroom, as it happens with all the seniors. It's very common, the physiology of the body. So, like, what do you do today? Do you turn on the lights of your room, of the bathroom, or do you have those automated lights of some kind? Whether like it's a sensor-based light which just turns on as you walk by, or alternative is like, hey, you have the smart light. Now for smart light, do you control using like, if you have to again you leverage the mobile app for that purpose, that's a bad choice. Because if you are a senior, like you pick up the phone, look at the app, like with the shaky hands, with like tiny fonts in the middle of the night when you are like barely opening your eyes, like it's simply
Correct.
not possible. Versus imagine like, okay, saying like, hey, turn on the light, or turn on the light at 10% dim brightness, because I don't want my mom or dad to wake up sleeping next to me, right? So
Correct.
that's the convenience and the life saving thing which it's bringing. Right now we are working with another company called in the personal emergency response systems, PERS devices, like those small pendants you might have seen for seniors, for
Yeah.
example, which is
Hmm.
like one button thing for emergency geolocation, geofencing. Now their relatives, the kids and grandkids who are actually asking the grandparents to wear those devices, they are concerned about their health and well-being and whereabouts, right? So, but they cannot keep on calling and checking and just logging into some dashboard every time, like, hey, where is my dad or where is my grandfather, right? Instead, like we are building voice-powered interfaces that, hey, while working, they can just simply ask the question to Alexa or Google that, hey, is my mom okay? Did they have a fall or anything in the last 24 hours? Or where are they right now? And say, hey, it's they're at home, no worries. Like, okay, I can continue my work. So it's bringing a lot more convenience, but again, there are some concerns around like, okay, somebody's hearing me aloud when I'm talking to something, or those devices are also spying on me. I mean, those concerns are valid, genuine. In some cases, some researchers have proved that they were listening earlier, and obviously Alexa and Google are trying to fix things as fast as they can to prevent the wrong branding and dirtying of their images. But yeah, it goes back to those basic principles of like how much value we find in adopting any service or product.
Got it. Someone just shared something, and even though I'm not going to be sharing the screen, I'll just quote it. What this individual has shared. So there's a couple, an elderly couple. They're talking to each other, and the husband is telling the wife that tonight we have to go out for dinner. So wife asks, "What happened? Why do we have to go out, and why can't?" He says, the refrigerator, let me just add the word smart, the smart refrigerator isn't speaking to the stove right now. So these are also some of the things, some of the challenges that sometimes these technological things or these devices can overpower. We've heard certain challenges, but that has nothing to do just with the IoT space. Let me be very clear about that as well, and I'm sure Biren would love to add something to that. uh, any new technology, any new language, any new product, any new service comes with its own sets of challenges, lessons that we learn, and they evolve over a period of time. So
Correct.
while we all love our Teslas and we love, how automagically everything happens, and like even my kids love that musical kind of interface that comes up and they stand out and they will start that. It looks like as if the car is dancing for them, but at the same time, it's evolving. There are risks involved in every single thing. Who would have thought a simple thermometer that used to have that mercury, imagine, made of glass, still used to do the same thing, versus all the thermal, these thermometers, which are, just have to bring close to your forehead or your hand, and now they're doing the same magic that used to happen.
Hmm.
Was the other thermometer which you used to stick in your mouth, was that not risky? I would say it was. It was made of glass. It had mercury in it. And it was so thin. What if it goes inside your mouth, and for whatever it takes, you could be landing in hospital just for checking your temperature, versus the new technological things that have come up. So while people are always going to have those challenges adapting to newer technologies, newer products, but I think it's very, very apt to say right now, especially in the IoT space, that the time is right now. Biren, you want to add something, or as we come to the end of this podcast?
No, I think you said the phrase, that's my favorite phrase. Time is right now, actually. So the innovations are not farther away in the future. It's happening as we speak. We are in the middle of it. We may not be able to see it clearly, because when you are in the middle of something, it obviously things are fuzzy and chaotic. And but when you look outside, step away, and then you look, like right there, we are right in the middle. So the future is now. In fact, I did a bunch of keynotes on very same topic. The
Oh,
future
nice.
is now. So it is very apt and appropriate at this point. And there is nothing specific about IoT, but it's whole the evolution of technology, whether it's IoT, whether it's a voice, whether it's AI, whether it's like Bitcoin and blockchain and anything we can imagine. Like, things are progressing to drive that fundamental human value of convenience at a lower cost, at a more secure, and like to something that fulfills our laziness, right? So that's how we keep on innovating around, and that innovation is going to go on. So we just need to decide, like, if and when we want to be part of it, and if so, how deeply and how closely.
All right. Before we wrap up, 2 points. So one, I'll take this question. I think this is a question from LinkedIn. Aruna is asking, what about the language barrier, specifically in India? How to overcome? How IoT can overcome, such kind of issues?
Yeah, so we are, I mean, for Speak to IoT and Smart India, we are riding on the shoulders of the giants for the very same reasons. Like, understanding language, localized language, is very difficult, and nobody in the world has the data set, the training data set for accents and the words and the meaning and the labeling, compared to what Google has or what Amazon has. So
Right.
naturally, their voice systems are super powerful, super sophisticated, and Google is claiming like 100 plus language support. So many Indian languages are also supported, and more are getting added to that list. So once there is enough data set to learn any particular language, making it learn is easy. And by virtue of us kind of riding on the shoulders of those giants, we automatically get the benefit of those language learnings, which is done by Google and Alexa and Samsung and Apple and whatnot.
Right. And as we come to the end of this first podcast, a beautiful quote: one shorthand abstraction that, if adopted, would improve the cognitive toolkit of humanity is to think bottom up, not top down. Very well said by, of course, Sushant Singh Rajput, who was also a very technologically savvy guy. Now, just to wrap it up, Biren, first of all, thank you so much for your time for this amazing podcast and to kick off a series of podcasts that are going to happen on this platform. If people want to connect and if they want to know more about it or they have follow-up questions, how do they contact Biren Gandhi?
So yeah, one, the Twitter handle is right there on the screen, Biren Gandhi. My LinkedIn is also same, Biren Gandhi. Feel free to send an invite. And for email, you can always hit me up at talk@speaktoiot.com. So we have deliberately chosen talk instead of info or contact. It's like we want people to talk. So
Right.
talk@speaktoiot.com.
Very well done and very well said. I'm really fortunate to have you on this particular podcast. And like I said at the very beginning of this podcast, I couldn't have asked for a better start. I'm sure a lot of more technologists, technocrats, all these enthusiasts in technology, some of the CEOs, some of the CTOs, CIOs, and whatnot. And even if you're an entrepreneur in the making, I just don't want people who have been there and done that. I would also love to have people who really want to do certain things, and they are either shy or they are not sure whether this is the moment, this is the time for them to kind of be more active, join some of the sessions, even come and share your issues, challenges. And I'm sure people like Biren Gandhi who have been there and done that are more than happy. The moment I reached out to him for this particular podcast, I don't personally know him. I did not even knew him from the Cisco days, even though we shared the same kind of company. But the moment he heard about this podcast, the initiative, the vision, he gracefully agreed. And I'm sure people like him, many more like Biren, would be more than happy to provide us all those lending hands or help. So don't shy away. Please reach out.
Varun, can I just quote like one of the famous quote which I personally like and try to live by is if you want to go faster, go alone, but if you want to go farther, go together. And that is the real spirit of this community based learning. Like we will be able to go much farther if we all go together.
Absolutely, absolutely, and amazing way to end this podcast as well, Biren. Once again, on behalf of the entire team, and of course the Silicon Valley Tech Podcast, we are very humbled to have you today, and I'm looking forward to another amazing session in the next few weeks. And thank you for such an informative talk, guys. Once again, before I end. You can always contact or get connected with Biren Gandhi on his Twitter handle, which is Biren Gandhi. You can always visit his website. He is the CEO of SpeaktoIoT as well as Smart India, and he's always welcoming towards people like me. So if you want to be mentored, if you want a very seasoned advisor, Biren Gandhi is the guy, and I will see you guys next Wednesday with another amazing podcast, another amazing leader of the industry. And keep supporting and don't forget to subscribe so that you can get notifications around the speakers, the topic, and of course, we also have a newsletter. So do subscribe to that newsletter as well, as I plan to share more insights around technology, and we'll take it from there on. And to wrap it up, also, if you have any kind of feedback, do reach out to me directly and we'll be more than happy to take any kind of feedback as well. So on that note, thanks once again, Biren. It was a
Thank
pleasure
you.
having you, and take care. Bye
Thanks
now.
a lot. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye bye.